insists that the Conservative Party is united, all is going well, and that we will stop the votes, and yet latest polling suggests they're in bigger trouble than I've ever seen them. I'm going to ask today, is the Conservative Party in terminal decline? We then go to South Wales, to Tata Steel, where inevitably we will cease to be primary steel producers in Britain as a cost of going green. Is it really worth it? And joining me on Talking Pints, my campmate from the jungle, award-winning actress Danielle Harold. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom tonight. The Prime Minister is calling on the House of Lords now to do what he says is the right thing and pass his Rwanda bill. Rishi Sunak, who says he's determined to control the UK's borders, was speaking to officials at Gatwick Airport this afternoon to highlight, he said, the importance of border security. Well, the third reading of the Rwanda bill passed through the Commons unamended last night with a majority of 44. Dozens of Conservatives had threatened to rebel, but in the end, only 11 voted against. Mr Sunak says peers must now support the legislation as an urgent national priority. And the Prime Minister's plan to stop the boats comes as the Home Office confirmed today 358 people were intercepted trying to cross the English Channel yesterday in 8 small boats. That means 621 people have arrived in the UK so far this year, despite more than 2 weeks of poor weather. The ASLEF Train Union has announced that drivers will go on strike for 5 days next month. LNER drivers will walk out from February the 5th in their long-running dispute over pay. The latest strike action is in addition to a series of walkouts against train operators across England, previously announced by the union. And as you've been hearing, thousands of jobs are at risk as Tata Steel has decided to push ahead with plans to close both blast furnaces at its Port Talbot plant in South Wales. The decision comes despite unions today putting forward proposals aimed at saving jobs, which Tata has rejected. The redundancies, which will be completed by March next year, will see 3/4 of 4,000 staff on site at risk of losing their jobs. Unions say they'll now consult their members, with industrial action not being ruled out. The Prince of Wales has visited his wife in hospital where she's recovering from planned abdominal surgery. Prince William was seen leaving the private London clinic by car this afternoon. Princess Catherine said to be doing well after her procedure, which was carried out on Tuesday, but it's expected she'll stay in hospital for up to 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla has said the King is fine and is looking forward to getting back to work as he awaits treatment for an enlarged prostate. The 75-year-old monarch says he's keen to go public with his condition to encourage other men to get checked out. That's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
Good evening. Well, I finally made it back to London, thank goodness. And the Prime Minister this morning giving a press conference. Have a look at this.
Well, the Conservative Party last night demonstrated that they're completely united in wanting to stop the boats. And this bill passed with an overwhelming majority in Parliament. But more broadly, last year was difficult. It's difficult for the country. We're still recovering from the impacts of COVID, the legacy of backlogs in our public services, also the impact of the war in Ukraine on people's bills. But at the start of this year, we are pointing in the right direction, and we have made progress. And that's why we've got to stick to the plan, because that's how we'll deliver the long-term change that the country needs.
Well, I'm really sorry, but do you believe he's going to stop the boats? Because I don't. Does he believe he's going to stop the boats? No, I don't think he does. And the idea that the Conservative Party is united on this or any other issue is for the birds. Now, look, we're used to political leaders of whether it be a governing party or an opposition party putting the best spin they can on things. But I just begin to get the feeling that no longer do we believe a single word this man is saying. And this is very much backed up by a YouGov poll that was out in the Times today, and it makes pretty grim reading for the Conservatives. It shows them now down to 20% in the opinion polls. With Reform, who, frankly, have not had a great deal of publicity, no major celebs joining them or anything like that, creeping up on 12%, and Labour with a massive, massive lead. Now, political parties have good times and bad times, and back in 2019, the Conservative Party had a very, very tough time, which I had quite a bit to do with. But they got out of that mess by Theresa May resigning, Boris Johnson coming in, and them saying, right, we finally get it. We understand you. We are going to deliver Brexit. We are going to take back control. And many millions of Brexit voters thought that also meant taking back control of our borders, reducing the numbers of people coming in to our country. They had a stonking majority of 80 seats. And what have they done for the last 4 years? Well, they spent most of it arguing among themselves, navel-gazing, arguments within the Conservative Party without much thought as to what the rest of the country really needs. And I never thought I'd really ask this question, but I'm going to debate tonight. Is the Conservative Party in terminal decline? I want your thoughts on this, please. Farage at gbnews.com or tweet #Farage on GB News. Why do I say that? I feel that the loss of confidence in the Conservative Party from 2019 Conservative voters is now at catastrophic levels. I'm not even sure there's anything they can do between now and the next election to get that support back. And whilst the first past the post system is what's kept in place two-party politics, remember, before the First World War, the Liberal Party were the governing party. They were ultimately, I accept it took a great war, it took the emancipation of women, but they were replaced by the Labour Party. I wonder whether there is any point to the Conservative Party. And I say that because they'll always argue amongst divisions that we're a broad church. But even a broad church needs a religion of some kind to believe in. I'm not sure they've actually got this anymore. I think they're not fit for purpose. I think they're on the way out. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Conservative Member of Parliament for North East Somerset, probably the nearest thing to a party loyalist one could ever meet, a true believer in the Conservative Party. Jacob, since about 1834, I think that's roughly the date when the modern Conservative Party has been recognisable as it is, has it ever been in graver danger than it is now?
Oh, yes, indeed. From 1846 to 1874, the Conservatives don't form a majority government. They split over the Corn Laws.
Yes.
The Peelites go off really with Gladstone to the Liberal Party, and Disraeli reforms the Conservative Party as a patriotic party that represents everybody in the country. Exactly, actually, what Boris was doing...
In 2019.
Which was interrupted. And the key for the Conservative Party is that we get back to representing the people who voted for us in 2019. And at the moment, they're with Donald Trump. They think of the handsome Mr Farage. I don't know if you've seen this poll, but 54% of them trust you, as opposed to 35% who trust the Prime Minister. And what we've done wrong is move away from our core supporters, and we've been set off course over the boats issue by some people who hold the EU effectively, I mean, they're calling it the ECHR at the moment, in higher regard than their own voters. And that's been why Rishi couldn't go further on the boats. I supported all the amendments, but there just wasn't a majority in Parliament for it. And I think there's a much bigger political problem. It's not the Tories, it's there is this disconnect between voters and those who are in charge, between the electors and the elected.
Well, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
And we can fix that, because we've done it before. If you take the whole history of the Tory party, you go back to the beginning of the 18th century, we have had long periods when we haven't made that connection, we haven't succeeded, but we've always managed to come back to get close to voters. That's what it's all about.
However, 20% is a very low number. Professor Matt Goodwin, and for the purposes of this debate, importantly, pollster.
Yeah.
These numbers are dire, aren't they?
They're very dire. I mean, the Conservative Party is on life support. And you think about why the Conservative Party historically has been one of the most successful parties in the history of democracy. It's because of its power to renew. It's renewed its ideology, it's renewed its electorate. But after 2019, after renewing itself around the Brexit divide, I think what strikes me is that the Conservative Party doesn't really know how to speak to the voters it inherited from Brexit. And so if you look at what's going to happen to the party at the next election, Nigel, with these poll numbers, the MPs who are left, they're not Red Wall MPs, they're not Northern MPs, they're Oxbridge-educated Southern Conservative MPs of a more liberal mindset. So the idea that after this catastrophic defeat, which the polls suggest is en route, I don't really think the Conservative Party is going to pivot back and say, well, let's rebuild this electorate. I think they're going to go into their comfort zone. And the problem is that comfort zone is university towns, big cities, social liberals, and they're not going to vote Conservative for a very long time.
One of the differences, Jacob, if you go back into history, you're quite right. I mean, Peel did the right thing in 1846, the right thing for the country, but the wrong thing for the party at that moment in time and for the next 22 years, or whatever it was. But there was no political party to challenge directly the Conservatives. You had the Whigs, the Liberals. But and we've seen this over the years with UKIP and the Brexit Party. Now you've got Reform. Now there is a challenger.
Well, you know perfectly well, because you've made this point. The Brexit Party had the great advantage in the European elections of proportional representation. You also had brilliant candidates, including one Annunziata Rees-Mogg, which I think inspired the nation. And that meant that people could vote for the Brexit Party knowing that it would lead directly to MEPs. The issue now is that, yes, Reform's on 12%, but it won't win a single seat. And it may well help turf out some quite proper Conservatives, people you would find a lot in common with.
Do you mean quite proper Conservatives who've overseen massive tax rises, a huge increase of the size of the state, open borders, legal immigration at levels we've never seen?
I mean quite proper Conservatives who, like me, voted for the amendments last week to toughen up.
You didn't vote against it ultimately, Jacob, did you?
No, because the bill was better than what we've currently got. And is there any point? Oh, yes. I mean, I'm not confident it's going to lead planes leaving quickly. If we had time, it could.
But this argument, Jacob, you might vote out some good chaps that exist within the Conservative Party. I don't know what percentage of the parliamentary party would be with a centre of public opinion on immigration, maybe 20% of you, no more than that. But the point is this. If the public think at the next election that Labour is going to win anyway, the idea that, well, don't vote for them because they're not going to win many seats, that fades away.
I don't think it does, because you have the question of, do you really want Labour to have a majority of 150? And do you want them to have a complete free-for-all?
Well, they might have it anyway.
As Blair had. And I do think you make one important point. You imply something very important, that when discussing this, one has to be very careful not to imply we are entitled to any voters.
No, well, I've been making this point.
Reform is not taking our voters. We are failing to inspire our voters. And even more than the people going to Reform are the people who are intending to stay at home. It's a bigger number of people, and in my view, ones it's easier to bring back if only we would say things that inspire them, which are the sort of things Boris was saying.
Jacob may well be right, but there's no leadership in the current Tory party going to bring those people back, is there, Matt?
Rishi Sunak's ratings are at a new low. There is no enthusiasm for the Rishi Sunak project, as we can see in the polls. Here's one interesting scenario to put out there, which I think differs from, say, the UKIP and the Brexit Party experiment. What if at the spring Reform is polling above the Conservative Party? That could be interesting, because going back to the 50s, there's a very famous French academic, Maurice Duverger, and he said the problem with first-past-the-post systems for challenger parties like Reform is that many voters look at them and say they're a wasted vote. But if they look at the national polls and they see Reform polling potentially above the Conservative Party, that changes the dynamic. And this, of course, is what the SDP never quite managed to do. It's what UKIP never quite managed to do, which is present itself as a credible alternative. And if that happens, everything's off the table.
The SDP did, though. In 1981, the SDP were polling over 50%. And in the 1983 election, they were in 1%, 2%?
So they got 25.3%.
And they got
23 seats, and Labour got 27 and a bit percent and 209 seats.
That's right. And that is the fundamental issue with first past the post, and it makes it difficult for challenger parties, even if they're getting close to the incumbent party.
There's one exception to that, and that's Canada 30 years ago.
Yes.
Where an incumbent Conservative Party with a majority and doing about as badly in the polls as the British Conservative Party is now, faced a party, oddly, called Reform. And they literally disappeared down to two seats. So it can happen.
Oh, extraordinary results can happen. And first past the post tends to exaggerate in one way or the other.
Because it can invert, can't it?
That's right, that's right. There's a tipping point.
I also wonder if I'm a 2019 Conservative MP, I'm thinking, I'm going to lose my seat. Why wouldn't I defect? Why wouldn't I leave? Why wouldn't I go out with a bang and think, you know what, actually, chances are I might have a better chance in this seat, in this red wall seat, under a Reform banner than under a Conservative banner. And I think that's another variable, a kind of known unknown in this election that may yet see a number of MPs say, I'm going to, roll the dice here, I'm going to try something different because I'm leaving politics anyway.
History suggests that Jacob's arguments are right.
Sure.
But is there a chance that this could be a real moment of historic change?
The chance is one issue, which is immigration. Throughout the 20th century, the Conservatives, throughout the 19th century, the Conservatives endured. But we are now in a world where identity and cultural issues matter just as much to voters, in fact, more to voters than economic issues. If you ask Boris Johnson's voters today, what is your top priority? They say stopping the boats. They don't say cost of living crisis. They say stopping the boats. So immigration could be the new Brexit. It could be the issue that cuts across left and right. And if Reform are picking up now about 15% of Boris Johnson's voters, what if that starts to go up? What if it's 25%, 35%, and they start to eat into some of the working class voters and the apathetic voters who are saying, I'm not going to vote at all? Then things start to change dramatically. And one thing I would say, look at the British election study, the premier study of the country's politics. That shows over the last decade, 60% of voters have changed their minds from one election to the next. We've never seen this before. So volatility, the churn in the system, has never been as high as it is today.
That is a very fair point.
That's an extremely important point. You just have to look at Labour in Scotland and Labour in the Red Wall to see how willing people are to change their minds. I mean, Labour in Scotland is quite extraordinary and something none of us ever thought we'd see happen.
No.
Reform has a challenge. And, Nigel, you are part of this challenge.
Sure.
If you think the SDP, with Roy Jenkins and Shirley Williams and so on, and David Owen particularly, really big figures, could not get through that hurdle. I just don't think there's any way Reform without you can do it, and you have an important decision to make.
Well, it's very good of you, Jacob, to put it back on me right at the end of this debate. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. And, folks, historically, of course the Conservative Party will survive all of this. I just don't know. Something just perhaps feels a little bit different. In a moment, we'll look at the awful, tragic death of 2-year-old Bronson Battersby. Is this yet another catastrophic failure of child services, or is it too easy of us to condemn local authorities when something goes wrong?
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, I asked the question, is the Conservative Party in terminal decline? Some of your feedback is really, really interesting. John says, of course the Tories are in decline because they have broken that many promises. Pam says, having voted for the Tories for 60 years, I will not be voting for them, nor will I ever vote Labour. David says, is this the worst political party in living memory for trashing our country? I think it is. And Ryan, I think, gets to the absolute point here. He says if they actually become Conservative, potentially they have a future. But considering the lies they have told over immigration since 2010, I would struggle to trust them. And I think that was the point Professor Goodwin was making. This now actually is about borders, it is about immigration, and it is very much about the population explosion happening in our country and the impact it's having on the lives of absolutely everybody. Well, who can fail to be moved by the horrendous story of the 2-year-old boy, Bronson Battersby, found starved to death in Skegness, next to his father, who died sometime before of a heart attack. It is one of those stories that's so horrid, you almost don't want to look at it or listen to it. But is this another total failure of child protection, another Baby P-style case? Or are social services so busy with so many cases that it just becomes too easy to point the finger of blame? I'm joined by David Niven, child protection expert and former national chair of the British Association of Social Workers, and he hosts a regular social work podcast. David, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I'm trying to approach this debate in an even-handed way, because it's too easy to say, look, social services have failed. But the one thing I would say, looking at the timeline on this case, is there seem to be some very big gaps between the door being knocked on in the first week of January and the door being broken down to find a dead 2-year-old on the 9th of January.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of questions, Nigel, that have to be answered, totally understood. But I think for the minute, all I can go on, perhaps like yourself, is what we've actually heard in terms of reporting so far. And I don't know if this child was what they call a child in need or a child at risk. I mean, and there's a very different, obvious distinction. And social workers are appointed to work with both groups, but obviously more focused and intensely with those at risk. But there are over 400,000 designated children in need in England and Wales. And every single day, the figure of number of children at risk is 50,000. Now, anybody can, I suppose, do the arithmetic, but you know what I'm getting at. It's essentially, you have terrible things, and sometimes people make mistakes and not to be doing the jobs they're doing in any of these disciplines. But nobody talks ever. When was the last time you saw a headline that said social worker does a good job?
No. David, I absolutely get that, and that's why I wanted to frame this conversation in that context. And to be fair,
thank you. Right.
To be fair, this is a tabloid story that we're looking at, and as you say, we don't have the information. We don't know whether that 2-year-old was on the at-risk register, do we?
No, we don't, and that is, if nothing else, a testament to the confidentiality that register is held in. But obviously, it's a question that you and your viewers will be actually thinking, was that the case or wasn't it the case? I don't know. I mean, I thought the social worker seemed to do pretty good as far as I could see from what we've heard so far. When she couldn't get in, she actually then went to other addresses to see if she could find them. And then when she couldn't, she told the police. And then when she went back again, as you say, a couple of days later, it was a sort of repeat performance, and she told the police again, and her managers, of course. So I'm not sure what happened in the middle there, and I think that's the testimony. But could I just say one thing? When I was listening there in the break, you were talking, one of your contributors was talking about big events, I think was the words they were using, that always somehow sort of focus the population's sort of view into something like this. Absolutely correct. And do you know what the first one that really hit was? A boy called Dennis O'Neill in 1945 was murdered savagely by a foster parent. And it went on, the country went into shock. And it's also caused Agatha Christie to write The Mousetrap, which is what it's all about. And effectively, it had that impact on the nation. And from then on, we've had, your Maria Caldwells, your Baby P's, and others that people distinctly remember. And I've got no problem with saying there were mistakes in these cases. But the 49,999 others that were being protected and interrupted, if you like, by social workers, police, health, education, all the people in the front line, never see much about that.
No. David, I get it completely. If you guys in your sector do your job well, we expect you to do it well. If anything goes wrong, you're total failures and you've let the side down. Final thought on this, if I may. When we look at the numbers of children on the register and those specifically at risk, how quickly are these numbers rising and why?
Well, they're not, interestingly enough, and that's bad in some ways, that for the last decade, at least, if not more, it's hovered around the 50,000 mark, always. Okay. But the difference now is, though, that now there are over 200,000 actual investigations, or inquiries, as they call it, whereas before there was far fewer. So we're actually doing more inquiries, more work now, but maintaining the list of those considered most at risk.
So are we potentially then missing people off this register?
Oh, we must be. Of course we are, because you can't be everything to the whole population. And like you said earlier, yes, it's people like me, or as I was, our job to actually do the work in terms of safeguarding, but it's everybody's business to do safeguarding. As you said, streets, neighbours, friends, extended family.
No, absolutely. No, David, listen, thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you've done over the years. Thank you for joining me this evening. And folks at home, I hope you agree with me that it's just, it's an awful case. It's a terrible, heart-rending case. But is it really all the fault of social services? Have a think about that. In a moment, something that really does annoy me hugely, 3,000 jobs are to go at Tata Steel in Port Talbot. It's a place where I broadcast from with GB News. It's all because, guess what, folks? We're going green. So we're deindustrialising the country. We will cease to be producers in Britain of primary steel. I believe it to be total and utter madness.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
The first ever Farage at Large we did was in Port Talbot in South Wales, and I talked there about steel. That actually to keep blast furnaces going was inconsistent with our net zero targets, and therefore what we were doing was happy to see the steel industry close down, move to India and China for steel to be produced under lower environmental standards than the product shipped back. And I feel furious when I learned the news today that 3,000 jobs are to go in South Wales at Port Talbot as the blast furnaces are to close. Is this not strategic madness for a country? Well, I'm joined by Roy Fishwick, Managing Director of Cleveland Steel. Roy, can you understand why I'm so annoyed about this?
Yes, I can to a degree. The two arguments have become blurred. So there's the net zero argument, which is very important and is an issue regardless, but a lot of that in the UK is about energy. And then there's the strategic importance of steel. And in fairness, I don't see that the current decisions have got anything to do with the strategic importance of steel.
So why are these decisions being made then? So why is this happening then, Roy?
Well, there's two things. You've got the decarbonisation, and electric arc furnace steel is without question a much lower consumer of energy. But you've got a very uncompetitive UK steel industry at the moment, even from the blast furnace side, so they're losing 1 million a day or whatever it is. But again, part of that's to do with the fact that the investment hasn't existed for donkey's years, and the energy costs in the UK far outweigh those of other places. And you've also got the issue in terms of the energy, the fact that no matter how many ways you look at it, the global steel industry is still exploiting energy and steel from, say, from Russia and for other markets that are otherwise excluded at the moment. So there's a real issue, not just in the UK, it is Europe-wide.
Yes, I mean, the energy cost thing, of course, again, is part of that going green net zero agenda, isn't it? You know, we have finished up with our manufacturers paying way more for their electricity, for their energy, than their competitors in Europe, America and elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would think that's down to the actual cost of green energy, because the cost of production of green energy, true production, I think is much lower than that of the carbon sources. But that's not how the UK industry prices its electricity.
No.
No. So we're still
I know there is a huge racket with how we price wind energy. I know that. That's a slightly separate debate. But Roy, I mean, you talk about electric arc, you know, and you're an expert in this, and that's fine for recycling steel, isn't it? But if we finish up with no blast furnaces, then strategically as a country, we are not primary producers.
No, we're not primary producers. Electric arc furnace has its limitations for the products it can produce.
Yeah.
It's also the case that actually all scrap is currently recycled, essentially 98% or something like that. So what we're doing at the moment is we're preventing scrap from leaving, or will be preventing scrap from leaving the UK so it can be consumed within the UK. But that's only saving transport carbon. Transport carbon is a fairly insignificant aspect in the total cost of carbon steel production. But we're already having to import at least 30% of the UK steel requirement. We can't make a variety of products that we require in the UK, within the UK now anyway. So as I said at the start, there's a different thing. At the moment, really, this seems to be about net zero, truthfully, not at all about the protection of the steel industry or a strategy for industry.
Yep. No. Well, Roy, I can't disagree with that. Net zero or perhaps nut zero, depending on your point of view. Thank you for joining me, Roy, this evening. Talking of going green, my What the Farage moment, there I was, travelling through Chicago the other day. Now, in Chicago, they're very keen on Teslas. And Teslas are great until it gets cold. And really cold. And then you can't charge them. So there were Teslas with batteries that were down, dumped, parked, all over the place. And, of course, you can't push them because they weigh a lot more than a conventional car. So, yeah, you can get your electric vehicles, folks, if you want. But if you have a cold snap, you've got a real problem. Now, I think this is probably the stupidest thing I have seen this week, and that takes something. Let's have a look at Labour MP Jonathan Ashworth asking a sensible question in the House of Commons, and then Alex Burghardt, the Parliamentary Secretary for the Cabinet Office, replying. Hold on to your hats.
Government lost £9 billion to duff unusable PPE. The Prime Minister, then Chancellor, signed off £7 billion worth of dodgy COVID loans. Even today, the government is losing £10 billion to tax fraud, £6 billion to universal credit fraud, billions and billions more across the public sector as a whole. Isn't the truth that families are paying £1,200 more on average in tax because this government simply cannot be trusted with taxpayers' money?
Yeah, and I really struggle with this line of questioning when but people on the other side of the House have very short memories. This was the worst absolutely worst pandemic that we have had in over a century. The pressures on government were immense, and the accusation that that we bought too much PPE is akin to people standing up at the end in 1945 and saying the government bought too many Spitfires.
No, it isn't, Alex Burghardt. What the hell are you on about, you idiot? Spitfires work beautifully until they're shot down. PPE, after 18 months, is out of date and has to be burnt. And you and your mates ordered 5 years' worth of PPE, and nearly 9 billion quid of taxpayers' money was burnt. If that's the best you can do in the House of Commons, well, maybe you're one of those that deserves to lose their seat at the next election as well. And a final thought, it is, of course, the World Economic Forum going on in Davos at the moment, and no surprise that the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, when he was asked about China, said this: "Our long-standing policy hasn't changed. It is a one-China policy, and we recognise China, and that Taiwan is part of China." There you are. The Republic of Ireland is now a big supporter of the communist Chinese takeover of Taiwan. I wonder how many voters in Ireland were aware of that. In a moment, well, she was there in the jungle with me. She is an award-winning actress who played an incredible role in EastEnders. Danielle Harrell was a delight to be with in the jungle, and I'm sure she's going to be an absolutely great guest for Talking Pints.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So when you say yes to going into the jungle for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, you've no idea who you're going to go in with. But you don't really expect your fellow campmates to take the mickey out of you, but this one did.
I'll take it down.
Nigel, we will not have another tonight like the rubbish. No, failed now. No, can't have that one again. Can't have them again. And we're like,
Nella gave me these to bring back. They're all dirty. Jesus Christ.
Well, she's just been out, Daniel Harold. Welcome to Talking Pints.
Cheers to that, no.
That was nice of you, wasn't it?
Was you not impressed? No.
It was quite a good impression.
I thought it was all right.
It was quite a good impression, but then it would be, because you are, of course, a multi-award-winning actress.
Oh, Nigel.
What's interesting, and you've won so many awards.
Thank you.
What's really interesting, there you were on reality TV, but it was kind of reality TV that made you in the first place, wasn't it?
Yeah, I started on a documentary with Jamie Oliver, actually, many, many years ago now when I was a bit younger. So, yeah, that was my first kind of taste. But it was a bit... I wasn't really in the industry then, so that was just me finding my way. So for this, I was really nervous because it was the first time being me having been in the industry. So, yeah, I was really nervous.
The difference being in the jungle is you're being you. When you're on EastEnders or whatever it is, you are playing a role, aren't you?
Yeah.
But for you even, Danielle, your background, you don't come from a privileged background or anything like that. To have managed to get a role on EastEnders, I mean, that was pretty cool, wasn't it?
So lucky. Could have been more grateful to learn in the best place to learn in the business, definitely.
But I was talking to you in the jungle and I thought, well, it must be so easy.
No, you did, didn't you?
I know, but I mean,
you
you're on a soap, it's regular money, it's unlike other actors who are fearful they can do great jobs, big theatre, whatever it is, but they're fearful of the next role.
Yeah.
You got a soap, it's dead easy, just turn up, do a couple of scenes here and there. But you were telling me, actually, all those years, was it 15 years, EastEnders?
Yeah, around 15 years in the industry, say about 11, 12 in EastEnders.
EastEnders. Actually, long hours and really hard work.
Yeah, I mean, you're there from 7 in the morning, 7 at night, but it's not just the day, you're constantly in these, like, awful storylines that you're having to play out sometimes. It's so hard and it sort of takes over your life when you're given a storyline like that. So, yeah, it's really, really difficult.
I honestly was shocked when you said the hours you were working.
You was actually,
no, I was.
You really genuinely was shocked that we were talking about it,
I thought you'd had a cushy number, you know. You got this role as Lola and, you know, part of the Mitchell family,
yes.
you know, the famous Mitchell family. When it came to the ending of your career on EastEnders, a very dramatic ending, and a very important story, which we'll come to. Do the scriptwriters tell you, now, Danielle, sorry, but Lola's not going to be here in the next 2 years? How does it work?
With a story like my one in particular, obviously, it took a lot of planning, a lot of research, a lot of time went into that, doing that story. So I actually found out quite early on very early for us, about a year. So I found out right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Normally you get about maybe 2-3 months notice, if that. So it's normally quite quick. So I had such a long time to know that I was leaving, come to terms with leaving, say goodbye. So I had a good...
Well, let's just share with our audience the clip of when you were first diagnosed with a brain tumour and you share it with the family.
I wasn't completely honest with you guys about what happened at the hospital. They did find something on my scan. A tumour.
What?
I've got a brain tumour.
Is it cancer?
Yeah.
Gives me goosebumps watching that.
How hard is it to do that?
I can't tell you how difficult them scenes are, especially with the research that we do. We get paired up with people living with brain tumours, which has been so difficult, but just so uplifting to work with these people. I can't tell you how much they've changed my life and touched my life. And playing them scenes, like, you just want to get it so right, because you know how many people are going through that and have had that conversation. So you just want to get it as spot on as you possibly can.
Even though you know it's a soap, it feels so real.
Yeah, it does. I just think, especially with soaps, they're amazing at what they do, that you're in everybody's living room every day, so you can tell these real-life stories, which is so incredible about doing soap, and what I love so much about being at EastEnders and being able to raise awareness of something like that was amazing.
That was the beginning of Lola's decline, and it led to the inevitable end. You won several awards again at the end of all of that, and that's it, EastEnders.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's done. Is that why you went in the jungle? You were in a bit of a loose end.
That's it. I come to find you, Nigel. That's why I heard you were going in.
We were in there for a long time.
Such a long time.
a long time.
Yeah.
What did you make of it?
At the time, I found it really difficult. Just it's so hard, isn't it? Like, when you watch it at home, you laugh, you don't think how tough that show really is to do until you're in there. But coming out now and looking back, it's probably the best time of my life. Like,
was it really?
Just shutting off from the world, I love that. Like, being, do you know, it was just so locked in just conversation. I mean, you've had the most amazing conversations that when would you ever, if you've got your phone or you're just busy.
Yeah.
So I miss that bit of it, I really do. Do you?
I have to say, being away from news
How do you feel now? Yeah.
was very, very odd.
Yeah.
Having spent sort of 40 years with, whether it's financial markets or politics or whatever.
Well, you become our news in there, really, didn't
and
you?
it's very odd. But I mean, I have to say, a couple of times, Danielle, you did come back from the trials a bit traumatised, didn't you?
A bit. What's the worst? I think I was definitely the worst in there for the trials. I was awful. This shaking thing going on that wasn't great, was it?
The creepy crawlers weren't really for you, were they?
Do you remember when we done the phone calling one?
Yeah.
You were just sat there, the bugs was coming on you, you just wasn't even flinching. I couldn't believe it. Do you remember?
I do.
Amazing.
I didn't want to show any signs of weakness.
You actually didn't.
At all. You were all screaming and shouting and jumping
clip of
around.
you having a go at me, being like, I'm your boss, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, Nigel.
Well, I was taking the mickey ever so slightly.
You was very good.
But pleased you did it.
Very pleased.
Yeah, I'm
very
pleased
grateful. Are you?
Yeah, I'm very pleased I did it.
Good.
One of the things I did enjoy talking to you about was the fact that when you'd done, you know, the whole stuff before with reality TV, you'd interacted with Alistair Campbell and Sherry Blair and all sorts of very well-known people, and that you had some pretty strong feelings about the education system, about current affairs, about what was going wrong in this country.
Yeah, it was a great subject to touch on, actually, the one that's just really not, and I think it really needs to be. And obviously Jamie Oliver had the idea to raise awareness in Parliament, and we actually went to 10 Downing Street and spoke there about it and tried to get change. Unfortunately, I don't think much change happened in this country. It was difficult to make change, but...
You felt that young people are leaving school not equipped to deal with the world.
Yeah, like almost like half or maybe more than half leave without GCSEs or grades and things, and all these people seem to fall into this system where it's like, it's just the testing system isn't great. Like, if you're not practical... So I'm a practical person, so for me, that's where I really did great in school, but written work was not for me, and that's where I was failing and everything. So it was great what Jamie come up with to change the education system and make it more better for people like me that could have done better had it not been written
and to
work,
train people. I mean, who's taught about getting a mortgage at school? Who's taught...
taxes or any of this stuff you just don't get taught in school. And I really wish that you do get taught things that you need when you leave school as well. It's important.
So are we letting young people down?
I think so, massively, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm still stick strong with the views when we done Jamie's Dream School that it's just such a shame it didn't change, because I'm here and I'm kind of an advocate for that. I didn't get GCSEs, and with that chance to do well from Dream School, I did, and I'm now doing what I love more than anything, so it definitely needs to change, it does.
Yeah, and you've also obviously campaigned for those with brain tumours of various kinds, and you want more research and more money. And I think the one thing you learn, Danielle, with campaigning is you have to stick at things for a very, very long time.
Well, we spoke about this. We touched on this in the jungle. I don't think it was shown, was it? I was asking you advice on how to help and what to do, and you was amazing, and I said thank you for all your advice.
I think with all these things, I think with all successful campaigns, I think persistence.
Yeah.
You just got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and building support and building support. But then there are so many other good causes out there as well. And
That's what's difficult.
It's not easy,
I know,
you know.
It's so difficult.
So you've done the jungle,
Yeah.
done EastEnders for almost a whole career.
Yeah.
What comes next for Danielle Harold?
I want you to take me around the world and teach me politics, Nigel.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I take you around the world. Well, there
Around
we
the
are.
world. I want to meet Trump, find out what's going on there with all that
Well, I've
stuff.
just been there.
Well, have you been?
I've
Because
been
we
there.
spoke about this, and you said you was going to see Trump. How was it?
I was in Iowa for the primaries
yes.
on Monday of this week, and he's probably going to be the next US president, I think.
You said we had this conversation.
Yeah, no, I
Really?
do.
Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
Well, I'd love to. What about acting? Come on, what's next?
Yes.
You can't just pack it up, can you?
No, definitely not packing up acting. No, it's my passion. So I've just come back now, and January is where our industry just starts to open now. January, February is audition time. So I'm hoping, get some auditions going now. Now I'm back. So I said I'd take a little minute just to have a rest, because I don't know about you, but I was shattered after.
Well,
You're not. You're like a machine. this
I
man
wasn't
is a
allowed to be
machine.
shadowed. I had to come straight back to work,
Can't
you know.
believe it. Straight out the jungle, you went straight into work, didn't you? That first night, do you remember?
Yeah, but I think the truth is,
Yeah.
I probably had the best detox in the
Yeah.
jungle I'd ever had in my adult life. I'm probably fitter than I'd ever been. So is it going to be film? Is it going to be soap? What's it going to be?
I don't think soap right now. I feel like
No.
I've done that quite a bit now. So I'd love to do a series now, I think, or film. I love getting the whole story to something. I feel like you can play it completely different when you know where you're going as a character. So yeah.
Well, I tell you what, given your track record, everything else you've done, I'm sure whatever you do next, you'll make a huge success of it.
Nige.
And I want to say you were fantastic company
You was too.
in the jungle. We got on really well, didn't we?
Who
We
would
probably
have thought?
surprised people.
Yeah, because
We
me
had
and you, opinions very different.
But we had a great time. And it's a
did have
pleasure
such
to
a
have
good
you here
time.
on GB News.
Thank
It
you
really
for
is.
having me. So
Thank
lovely
you.
to see you, Nige.
Well, it's been a funny old week this week, I have to say. It's ended very nicely talking to Danielle, but from the snows of Iowa back to here. But I've got a feeling when you see the weather forecast in one moment, it might be quite chilly here over the weekend too. See you Monday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Friday will be another dry and sunny day for most, and showers are becoming much more limited to the far north, but there's still a snow and ice warning in force for many areas of northern and western Scotland. High pressure is centering itself more centrally across the UK overnight tonight, and through Friday that will bring the drier weather. So through the night tonight it will turn dry for many areas, plenty of long-lived clear spells, some mist and fog, freezing fog in fact for some areas of Wales and inland England along the Pennines as well. But in the far north of Scotland we'll see that continued risk of heavy snowfall. The snow will turn a little bit slushier as the night progresses, but there'll be some ice on any untreated roads by the morning. It's going to be another very cold start tomorrow morning, as low as -9 in southern rural areas. But there'll be plenty of sunshine once again, another bright and sunny day for the bulk of the UK. We've got a bit more of a westerly wind, so it will be a bit breezier on the coast, but that does mean that the temperatures will be a little bit higher than recent days, 6 or 7 degrees in the southwest, but still a fairly gloomy day with plenty more snow showers to come in the northwest. A very unsettled day on Saturday for north and western areas, with the winds picking up as we see a marked change in our weather for the weekend. Some quite heavy rainfall to come for parts of Northern Ireland and very many northwestern areas of the UK. And as the temperatures start to climb through the weekend, the snow will start to melt across much of Scotland, so that could bring some flooding issues. See you later.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too. Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight,